Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that Music New South Wales HQ is on unceded land belonging to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Nations person joining us for this live stream. I also invite you to reflect on the land you are joining us from today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Sound Advice. Touring is complicated. There are so many things to keep track of, like venues to approach, backlines, transport, budgets, accommodation, all this before a chord's even been strummed. So that's why we're doing this advice panel. We're here to help you. And it's meant to equip you with whatever the road can throw at you. And it will include an intro to Music New South Wales's brand new game-changing tour planning tour, the Regional Touring Network. Music New South Wales is supported by Create New South Wales and APRA AMCOS. A bit of housekeeping before we kick off. There is a Q&A as part of this talk. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom and we'll get to them at the end. This event also has live captions on for anyone who finds that useful, and it will be recorded. So you can go back and listen to it later if you like via musicnewsouthwales.com, where you can also find a bunch of other resources. It's a great website. This is a digital event. So if for any reason your internet drops out, you can just rejoin on the same link. We've got a pretty special panel with us today. So I'm not sure if Loren's here yet, but I'll introduce her anyway. Loren is an artist, educator, and Gamilaroi woman. She writes original songs and translates well-known Australian songs into her mother's tongue, Gamilaroi. Some of Loren's highlights over the years include singing a live duet with her idol, Jessica Mauboy, performing as a headline act at Yarbin Festival, and singing with superstar Kelly Rowlands during her live audition for The Voice. I've also got Rebecca Young, or Beck. Beck is the director and senior agent at independent booking agency Collective Artists. Her roster includes Aldous Harding, Sarah Blasco, Tia Gostello, and more. Rebecca is also music programmer for Fairgrounds Festival and a director at not-for-profit charity One of One, which supports women and gender non-conforming folk in the music industry. Last but not least is Tom Gordon. Across his two musical acts, Horror My Friend and West Theberton, Tom has toured nationally and internationally at some of the world's most notable venues and festivals. Tom currently works for Wollongong's Yours and Ours. Hey, Loren, here we are. Tom currently works for Wollongong's Yours and Ours as a booking agent, Farm and the Owl as an A&R representative, and directs his own management group, Planet Shh. Again, for anyone who's just jumping on, we do have a Q&A function as part of this chat. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A at the bottom and we'll get to them at the end. But for now, I'm asking the questions. My name's Nia, hi. So I guess this one goes to everyone on the panel. Why would you tour?
That's a good question after the last 2 years. Not sure. It's been a tough time, but I guess the main reason is people tour to, showcase the music that they've recorded and connect with fans and, I guess build their audience through another platform.
I definitely feel like, at least from my end, feel like there are plenty of reasons for touring. Obviously, like there's, beginning to create audiences for yourself in new markets, but also I think building connections outside of your hometown, whether that be, other artists or other communities as well as industry professionals. I think it's just also a great learning experience for like young bands to see what actually goes into it, and so that they actually appreciate their booking agent's job and what they do.
Thanks, Tom.
I think it's time right now actually to get on the road. Fans are really excited to hear your new music and to create some excitement around your music. People are they're ready. The last few shows that I've done, around town and out of town, the fans have been, they've definitely showed up and had a great time and, invested in merch and CDs and things like that. So, it's the perfect time to be on the road.
I mean, outside of a COVID context, I know that what you're saying kind of means, you know, you've been making music for all these years and your fans are really hungry for it. Outside of that, when do you think is a normal time to tour, or when do you think as an artist is like, when are you ready?
When I guess that was me. When you have something to promote, I guess, when you have some new music to share with the world, that's the best time to go on tour, I reckon.
I think on my end, I definitely agree, as long as you've got some music out there. But I do think there's not necessarily a specific time. I kind of personally believe that touring can be beneficial at any point, as long as you've got a set together and have practiced enough. Although I think in general, it generally helps to make a bit of a name for yourself in your hometown before heading out, because obviously that gives bookers a bit more of a reason to book you in. Because if you come in and you're like, hey, we're this new band, we've never played a show, there's very little reason for a venue booker to be like, well, am I going to risk it by putting this band on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think touring around a release is a great strategy, but building your audience in your hometown and your home state first. You know, you can tour around New South Wales or Victoria, wherever you're based, before you venture out into other states. But yeah, I think most of the time, most artists that I work with, and I'm sure you're the same, Tom, generally build a tour around a single or an album or an EP, because it helps, you know, give that tour some context and backing.
Other than creating new music to release, are there other things that artists could be doing to get themselves ready for a tour?
I think making sure that you're financially ready to do it. Touring is very expensive, especially if you are going to travel interstate, especially now when we're seeing the cost of living increasing. You know, flight costs have gone up, there's cancellations all the time. So just doing your research and your budgets in advance, and really figuring out if your band or you as an artist can afford to travel and how much you're going to get out of it. I think that's really important to do that sort of planning beforehand. But at the same time, you know, sometimes you get handed a really great opportunity and maybe you get offered a really amazing support spot for a big band and you're only going to get paid $500 a show and there's 5 people in the band. It's like weighing up those opportunities versus how much you can afford to pay for.
I think I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but also just like, just making sure that before you head out on tour, your set is actually kind of, you got it down to a fine art. Because I think there's nothing worse than like going out and just not being ready to show your set. I feel like a lot of like local bands, the best thing to do is just play a bunch of low pressure shows to get your live set down. And once you've built a following, you know, you can pull back on those local shows and focus on those like interstate markets where you haven't been. I'd also recommend like bands starting to chat to bands from other cities that are of a similar genre and level to you, rather than just focusing on industry and venues. But, you know, I think a good way to start is to look at other bands who are kind of in a similar place and, you know, offer a show swap. For instance, if you're doing a single launch, go, hey, like, we really like your band. Do you want to come and play my single launch and we'll come and play yours in Melbourne, you know, or Sydney or wherever, you know? I think there's plenty of things that can be done. Yeah.
Can you speak to that at all, Loren? What was it like for you when you first started touring?
Yeah, when I did my very first tour, I'm not too proud to say it was a complete fail. Complete fail. I went out on the road on my own, doing solo shows. I had 4 venues booked, and none of them really were any good. Not the venues, but it just didn't turn out the way that I thought it would in my mind. You know, one venue I got to, the regular bands that they had on just weren't anything like what I was presenting. Another venue was kind of like a sit down and eat, and the music is kind of ambient. so I couldn't really hone in the crowd the way I wanted to, and you know, sell the EP and the music that I was bringing to them. Yeah, and that was the same with another venue actually, and you know, getting there and realizing, oh no, there's actually not enough space to set up my gear. I'm tucked away in this little nook. I look really uncomfortable because I am. There's barely enough room for my guitar here. I'm hitting the wall. I'm not looking professional. And so, yeah, my very first tour was a complete fail, but I was able to learn so much from that. And so, yeah, I really resonate with what Tom has said and what Beck has said as well, reaching out to local artists who might be able to help you sell tickets if that's the way you're putting your shows on, or, you know, get some local intel on venues. You know, is this the right spot for me? You know, do they really appreciate music at this venue? Am I going to get what I need to get out of it, or what I'm looking to get? And yes, having your set prepared, and also keeping in mind, you know, the time in between songs means just as much. You know, does your music come with a message? Does it raise a talk point? You know, can you make those moments in between songs mean just as much as the song itself?
I like what you said about having that intel on local venues, because I think that that's what the regional touring network will touch on later when we explore that. And in this chat, we have kind of talked a little bit about where you should tour, and we've talked about touring in regional towns and touring in your hometown and swapping cities with other bands. Is it ad hoc like that? Are there any hard and fast rules to choosing places that you should be touring?
I kind of feel like you can tour anywhere, but it's always good to try and figure out whether there's like a culture or a community around the genre that you're playing. I think that's a really important thing, because certain cities or towns will just have like a really strong rock culture or a really strong electronic culture. And I think to begin with, those are the best places to target, because there is already that community around what you're doing, and it's a bit less pressure, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think, like Tom said before, looking at what other bands are doing, you know, even if they're at a higher profile than you, and going, well, I want to do that, so how did they get there, or what shows are they playing? And, you know, I think Tom's a great example, like in the work that he does with Yours and Ours. Like, I know when I've got a band of a certain kind of style, I can be like, I want to take them to Wollongong, and so I'm going to contact Tom or Ben or someone at Yours and Ours, because they've got a few different venues that, you know, support certain types of artists. And that's been a really great platform for new artists to, you know, to play these venues when maybe they don't have a profile there yet, but I can be like, can you chuck this band on as a support, or can you put them on your free night, see how it goes, and then we'll build up to the ticketed venue. So I think it's just about finding those places. Also just looking at your demographics and your stats on, you know, social media and Spotify. And if you're like, oh, like we're from Sydney, but all of our listeners are based in Melbourne, you know, maybe that means it's a good time to go to Melbourne and suss out what's happening down there and play to your audience there. So I think keeping an eye on your stats can be really helpful to, you know, dictate where the fans might be as well.
At the top of this chat, supporting other bands and touring with them was mentioned. Can you walk me through kind of how you arrive at that? So how you choose a band that you'll be supporting, and what it means to be touring with another band?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a booking agent, you know, so I represent artists, and if they're doing a headline show, they will choose their support band. So sometimes that means I reach out to bands. Other times it means, you know, artists can email my business at any time. So we have contacts on file for different artists all over the country. Maybe it's like a case where an artist will message someone on Instagram, or like I work with an artist called Phoebe Go, and I wanted to pitch her to support another artist I work with called Maple Glider for Maple Glider's Melbourne show. And I sent an email to her manager, and he was like, oh, Maple Glider's already messaged Phoebe on Instagram, and she's going to do the support because she loved her new song. So there's just like really natural ways like that where an artist will go, I like that band, I'm going to ask them to support me. But I think cold emails are completely reasonable as well. If you see an artist and you want to tour with them or support them or play with them, just reach out to them. You know, like what's the worst that can happen is that they don't reply. So I think that's kind of how it happens on my end, but I'd say it's probably different for, you know, Loren as an artist. I'm sure your process might be a bit different.
Yeah, I've only really just started to look into, you know, opening for other people and jumping on those opportunities. I am one who really does, you know, study other artists, and I really like to, you know, keep on the pulse of the industry and support other musicians and, you know, really pay it forward. And I'll see other acts who might be opening for a band I really love and go, oh man, I wonder how they got that. I wish I could, you know, have that spot, or things like that. And so, yeah, you really do have to jump on those opportunities early. It is all about networking as well. And, you know, if the band is from overseas, you know, maybe you've just seen that their album has dropped, could be on the cards that they're coming to Australia. So yeah, I mean, sliding into communication however you can, and, you know, trying to jump on those opportunities is really good. I'm still learning about how to do it, and yeah, there's this one band who may be coming to Australia who I really would love to open for, and so I got in contact with their representatives here in Australia and said, you know, what will it take for me to you know, be on the short list for opening for this act? And they got back to me and said, you know, you need a really good EPK, and you need to have, you know, at least 500 followers on Spotify, and, you know, just little things like that. Not really little things like that, but, you know, things that help your profile look real deadly. And yeah, just to show them that, you know, you're really supported out here, and you would be an asset to them if they were to have you on their show.
Yeah, I guess that kind of speaks to what we were talking about before with building that profile in your home or just in the places around you, and then moving outward from there. We did, when we were talking about getting ready for a tour, touch on planning before, and planning for COVID and budgeting and all of those fun things. I want to delve more into planning for a tour now. I feel like tours usually hinge on some kind of concept, whether that is, you know, an album launch or a release. And Beck, you touched on music having a theme and whether that will be compatible for different venues. Can you guys walk me through, you know, building a concept for a tour and how that happens? I'll start with you, Tom. You haven't talked for a while.
All right. I think Beck kind of touched on it a little bit before. I feel like the most obvious choices in terms of concepts for a tour are, of course, like a release, like a single or an EP or an album. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily need to be based around like a release. Like, you know, I've seen lots of people think of really creative tours. Like, I remember there being, when I was younger, I remember there was a bit of a thing of like triple treat tours where they would have 3 bands who were kind of on the same level, and they would roll the dice each night, and a different band would headline each night on the tour, which I thought was a really cool idea. And it's also like, I feel like there's a sense of fun in that for the audience as well, not knowing who they're going to see. Like, you bring all your audiences together and, like, you know, co-marketing what you're doing as well. Like, for instance, I remember we just played a show for Sweater Curse's farewell show in Brisbane, and there's a stacked lineup and pretty much all the bands are around the same level, but rather than just having a normal lineup, it was a spinning wheel to choose what the set times were. And and you
Oh,
know,
that's such a great concept.
yeah, and
I see bands on that too.
Yeah, and people were there from like 2 p.m. And
Mm.
unfortunately, we had to go first, but good to get it out of the way at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think generally the concepts are based around a release, but sometimes people might do like a Christmas show or, you know, Halloween, or I don't know, there's different things. But I think I'd say the most common one is to tour around a release or to do a co-headline or a triple headline tour like Tom mentioned. So generally that's the starting point for me, is for the artist to be like, I want to do a tour around this release or this idea, and then we sort of start working on venue ideas from that. And I guess the venues will be based on what the artist might have done in the past. And if they haven't done anything, then we're kind of starting from scratch and being like, all right, you've never played in Melbourne, so let's figure out a show in Melbourne that's not going to be really risky. You know, so I think that's generally the starting point for me as an agent. Yeah.
While we're on the topic of planning tours, I know that the Q&A is at the end, but I've just got a great question from Amy that I want to jump to. They've asked about the current touring climate. They said they're hearing a lot of stories about really established artists struggling to secure good ticket sales at the moment, and audience hesitating on not purchasing until the very last minute. How does that impact your capacity to book a tour? I feel like it would make it really difficult to see if there was even an appetite for the shows. How do you plan around that?
Very tough at the moment. That is 100% true. And I feel like it's all I've been talking about in the last month, especially with other agents, managers, promoters, festival bookers. Everyone's like, just buy tickets, because we're all finally back. You know, shows are happening, everyone's touring. But I think it's down to a few different things. It's consumer confidence after 2 years of cancellations and rescheduling. The market's really flooded right now. There's a lot of bands touring again from Australia and overseas. Festivals are all coming back. The cost of living's gone up, and people are still getting COVID and they're still getting sick. And maybe our lifestyles have changed a little bit. You know, maybe people don't want to go out as much as they did, or they're a bit more, choosy with what they spend money on. So it's been really tough as an agent, because, you know, we might be planning a tour for an act of a certain level and go, well, the natural step is to do these venues next, because we sold those ones out last time. But then we're doing that and it's not selling out, or it's not even selling enough tickets to make the tour viable. And I think we're seeing a lot of bands canceling shows. Sometimes they're honest about it, sometimes not. It just sucks, because we've all been through such a rough time, and to then now have to be faced with a really tough climate is just brutal. And I hope it evens out, but I think it could take another 6 to 12 months before we sort of, you know, see that flow happen again. So I think what I'm just finding on my end and with other people is that everyone's like, let's just be cautious and maybe go for the more cautious option, which is maybe you play the same size venue as you did last time, or you go for like an intimate show rather than the big step up. Because we're just not sure what's going to happen. So, yeah.
You sound hopeful that it'll level out, though, which is nice.
It's like, after all this time, just got to still be hopeful that, you know, things will pick up. And people are sometimes buying tickets last minute, you know, like I had a show a few weeks ago that was a 600 cap venue in Melbourne. We'd sold like 400 tickets a week out, and then we sold it out. So there were lots of last minute buyers. There's also really high no-show rates still. So most venues are seeing like 10 to 30% of people just not show up. So they don't ask for a refund or anything, but they just don't come to the event, which can be really confronting if you think you've sold out a venue and then there's only 2/3 of the audience there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Loren, has that ever happened to you?
Yeah. A lot of times. But I think, you know, if you're on here and if you're on the chat, chances are you're an up and comer. You know, you a shit kicker like me. Just, you know, trying to kick the shit a little better. Excuse my language, but that's how it is sometimes. And, you know, sometimes you just have to think outside the box as well. Who can your music appeal to? Like the last 2 tours that I've done, one has been to exclusively First Nations communities, people who I know I can connect with, being a blackfella. So I was able to go on the road with my sister girl, Coralia Knox. We got some funding, which was really helpful. And the funding was to record a 3-song EP and take it to remote First Nations communities. And this was, you know, during COVID and when we still had lockdowns interstate and things like that. So we went out on the country. So we went to, you know, all corners of Gomeroi country, which is our traditional land, and we took music right to the doorstep of these fellas that usually miss out on music. You know, the concerts either in the next town over, they can't get there. We went to the Mission and we played. We played, you know, on the Mission, on the veranda. We played at the community centre. We played at the park. We played at these places we knew where people could gather. So if you're lucky enough to have funding to do that, you know, think about those options. Can your music be sold to school-age kids? The most recent tour I've done, and I'm still trying to book some more locations on, is like a kids tour. So I have been contacting schools and daycare centres who I know have funding for First Nations teachers, knowledge holders, to go in there and share, you know, aspects of culture, music, things like that. You know, I've rung these places up. I know you have funding. I've got this, you know, kids album that I've just released this year. It features traditional language. Can you put it, you know, somewhere in your curriculum or in your program? I'd love to come to the school. This is my price. Is it within your budget? Does your music appeal to LGBTIQ+ communities? How can you deliver to them? Yeah, just thinking outside the box, going places where you're guaranteed you're going to have an audience. It was only school kids, but like the last show I did there was 150 people there, and they were so little and so cute. And they danced and they sang and they knew my stuff, and you know, they went home and they told their parents, and I jumped on and looked at my analytics a couple of days later, and I had a bunch of new followers who I knew would probably be mums and dads of these kids, you know, just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, so that's one
so cool.
Marketing strategy that I've not heard yet, but I absolutely love that. Beck and Tom, can you speak to marketing and publicity strategies for touring at all?
I think there are plenty of different ways. I guess it really depends on like the level of artist you are and the budget that you have. I guess those are pretty much the main two factors. I guess assuming that the majority of the people we're speaking to are kind of like up and coming, like don't have a huge amount of money to spend, I think the best thing you can do is obviously just like even just putting a little bit of money into like sponsoring some social media posts and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the algorithm does work against us at the moment. But I think that is probably the most effective thing you can be doing, but just also making sure you're like the content you're creating is engaging, rather than just going, we're doing a tour, here's a post of the tour poster and that's it. You know, like if you can just like take some video from a previous live show or something like that, post that up, you know, like just try and think outside the box rather than if you don't have enough money to do it, you know.
Do you have anything to add to that, Beck?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's pretty tough, you know, and there's a lot of conversations going on at the moment about artists being content creators and how unfair that can be. But I think you can still tailor it to your brand and, you know, to your style, and you don't have to be, you know, doing silly stuff on TikTok or whatever to, you know, to get your message across. And it's just, I guess, about being unique and yeah, finding that voice and getting your friends behind it. If you're really emerging and really new, it's like, get people to share your stuff. I mean, I book Fairgrounds Festival in Berry, and when we did a post a couple of days ago being like, who do you want to see on the lineup? And someone tagged, I can't remember the artist's name, but yeah, someone tagged him, and then like 50 people were like, Fairgrounds, you have to book this guy. I was like, whoa, okay. You know, but I loved seeing all that support from his community because they're getting behind it. So I just, things like that are like, you know, you can't pay for that. So get your family and friends behind you if you really need to. Get them down to your shows, you know, get them to talk about it. And that's usually the best way to build awareness, is around, you know, doing a great live show, or starting something really cool on social media that people get behind because it's different and interesting. You know, a lot of artists these days have huge online followings before they've even played a show for various reasons. So it kind of works in two different ways, depending on what suits you, I reckon.
I guess on that too, with the online following, for the past 2 years, you know, artists have been playing these shows that have been super accessible and online. People can access them whenever they like or need. Now that live shows are back and people are touring again, how do you account for accessibility for artists and audience members? How do you navigate that?
I've got a lot of artists that do ask questions about that now. And it's something that I've started to put into contracts and just to talk to venues about before I book a show. So I ask them about, you know, their accessibility and like if they've got gender neutral toilets and just all that kind of stuff, which I think it's a much bigger conversation in the last few years, which is great, but there's still a lot of people that aren't doing that work. But I think at the end of the day, it's down to the artist and their team. And if they don't have a team, then it's, you know, you can ask those questions and you can push that. And the more times that a venue or a festival get asked these questions, they're going to be like, okay, everyone's asking us about accessibility or the, you know, gender neutral toilets or whatever it might be, or having an Auslan interpreter on stage. I think a lot of people are doing that now, which I think is fantastic if you can afford it. You know, it's still something that's growing, but I think there's lots of outlets there to support that. So I think it's really important.
Loren, I want to throw that one to you as well, because when you were talking about that tour you did, playing on, you know, verandas and playing in parks at places where you knew your audience were, how did you account for accessibility with those shows?
Yeah, it is really important to think about that. Definitely one story that comes to mind, and this was, you know, a big mistake on my part. I got to one of the venues that were booked in and realized that the only way to get there was up the stairs. And so a lot of my shows, a lot of community come along, you know, elders who, you know, walk with a frame or have a wheelchair. And at this venue, I had to make a trip to the car, came outside, saw that there was an elder there in a wheelchair, no way to get up the stairs. So I rallied up a couple of the brother boys. We carried him up the stairs in the wheelchair to the show. But that's it's a very important thing, accessibility. And, you know, thinking about your audience and how you can make them comfortable, really. You know, there's nothing like going to a show and you know, feeling like you belong. Your audience goes there and they talk amongst themselves, you know, between songs, or they might stand or sit up the back and, you know, have a yarn while you're singing, and they get to know each other. You know, you make friends at these things as well. So I think, yeah, a good show is one where you feel welcome, you feel comfortable.
Loren, you spend so much time talking about mistakes you've made. I think you're an amazing artist. I wish you didn't do that. But I guess, like, from that, what do you wish you knew before you went on tour for the first time?
Everything. Oh man, just to plan within your means. You know, audience-wise, money-wise, travel-wise, don't burn yourself out. Yeah, just be very well prepared. to have your list of contacts and emergency contacts. And as a young woman who's often out on the road alone, you know, always making sure that your car's right to go, always making sure that you're safe, and yeah, just those things to plan within your means, and then you'll always be set for success.
Tom, what do you wish you knew before you went on tour for the first time?
I think Loren kind of said this before, but I think just the first time you tour, don't necessarily expect it to be like incredible and playing to huge crowds in every city. Like the first time I ever toured, I pretty much played to no one around the country, and but it was really fun. And I think the value of a tour isn't necessarily in playing to a large crowd or like a huge audience, or like, it's more just like creating connections and starting to build community there. Because, you know, I think those first shows, I just met a bunch of people, and I met a bunch of people who then helped me do my second tour, and that tour was much better. And then it just kept on building like that. And I think that's something that's worth remembering for people who are not necessarily within the Triple J realm or something like that, or not being picked up by, you know, playlisting or something like that, and they're not getting extra support. Is like, you can do that work yourself and build communities around what you're doing. And I think that's, I don't know, that's the first thing, that's the thing that I wish I knew, is that just because the first tour wasn't the best doesn't mean that that's the end of it, you know? Yeah.
Can you speak to that from a booker's perspective at all, Beck?
Yeah, definitely. I've booked tours and shows, and, you know, you ask for feedback afterwards, and the band's often very disappointed, or, you know, whether it's a headline show and they didn't sell very many tickets and they lost money, or maybe they just, you know, they traveled to do a support spot and no one was there to see them. But, you know, I think just trying to see some kind of positive in each situation, even though it can be really, really tough for people to tour. But I think being like, okay, maybe you didn't play to that many people, but like 2 people bought your record, and then they're going to go and tell their friends about it, or they're going to post about you on Instagram or something. And, you know, that's how you build fans. So, you know, sometimes it's just tough, but I think trying to see the positive is really good. And building on whatever you might learn, you know, if you did make mistakes, or like Loren said, you know, if you feel like something's failed, it's like, okay, well, what can I do next time to change that? Like whatever that might be. But sometimes it takes a few really hard tours before you feel like things are connecting or working or making money. You know, it's hard out there.
Well, yeah, let's talk about hard tours and tough tours. Or like, I feel like even if a tour, and this is just me stabbing in the dark, but even if a tour is successful, it's tough. Like you're on the road for a long time. You're putting your heart out in a show night after night. You know, you're not home. How do you look after your mental health in a situation like that?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think music culture is so entrenched in like alcohol and drug and party culture, traditionally. But I think the best thing you can do is just look after your body. Is like, you don't need to get absolutely wasted to be a cool rock band or something like that. You know, you don't need to do anything that you don't want to do. You know, it's totally okay to play the show, have a few glasses of water and go to bed. Because especially if, you know, like when you start off touring for the first time, your budgets are low, you're probably either driving and having to leave really early, or if you're flying, you're leaving at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, you know? So the best thing you can do is just get sleep and look after yourself.
Do you have any tricks for that, Loren?
No, I really resonate with what Tom said. Yeah, take care of your body. Stay away from the grog. You don't really need to. And you'll be able to remember the good times a lot better if you do. So yeah, I mean, that's the main one. Take care of yourself. And you know, if you're in a band, check in with your bandmates as well, and reflect. Keep an eye out for each other.
When we're talking about some of those hardships that come with touring, do you think that they're different when you're doing your own tour to when you're maybe touring in a festival circuit?
Yeah, I guess if you're doing your own headline tour, you're taking all the risk on board. Whereas if you're doing a festival or a support spot for someone else, then you're usually getting paid a guaranteed fee. So you know what the fee will be before you get to the show, and you know that it might be $200 or 500 or 5,000 or whatever it is. That's your fee. You can budget based on that. But headline touring, like we said before, with ticket sales, you might not know until the night of the show, like how many people are going to be in that room, and then you don't know how much merch you're going to sell and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a bit, a bit more fickle, I guess. And yeah, it just means you sort of have to have that financial stability and backing before you really even go out on the road to decide whether you can potentially lose that money if you don't make enough to cover your costs, which, if you're a solo artist, it's one thing. If you're in a band that splits the money equally, that's a different thing. I work with a lot of artists who are, solo, but they have full bands, and so they pay all their band fees and accommodation and travel, and it's really adds up. But yeah, I guess the main thing about the headline shows is that the artist takes on all the risk, the artist and the venue.
We have some questions popping up about festivals as well, which I'll jump back to later. But yeah, while we're talking about doing your own headline tour, I'll start with you, Tom, because we've been a bit negative. What's the best experience you've had on a tour?
I think the best experience I've had on a tour would be Wes Theberton's first album tour. Because at that point I'd been playing in bands for maybe like 6-7 years. But I would say the majority, I'm going to go slightly negative here, but it ends good. That's why. Okay. So, prior to that, like pretty much every headline tour I'd done had, like either been no turnout to very little turnout, except for the hometown show. And then, that was the first time it felt like the work actually like culminated in something. And it happened for both bands that I play in, and it's happened for the band that I manage as well. And that was just like the best experience was realizing that work actually paid off, and people came to see it, and people enjoyed it, and we connected with people. And I think there's also a good message in that, in terms of like, if you do have like tours that don't go as well as you'd hoped, just don't give up, and like expect to, like, unfortunately, the first couple of tours you might lose some money, but like any business that you start, if you have to invest a little bit in before you can expect to get a return. So yeah, I guess that would be my best experience. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the question in the chat, because we're talking about oh my God, I'm completely losing my mind. We were talking about, like the choice to book, a big tour or a little tour. And I can't find the question now, but someone earlier asked about the risk factor in that. And, if it was better to kind of throw a lot of money at booking a big tour and just getting your name out as much as you can from the get-go, or spending a little bit more time grounded and doing those more local shows. I guess I'm kind of just following on from what you just said about expecting to lose money. Will that happen regardless, or does that only happen when you're kind of shooting high and doing big shows?
I guess it varies, and some artists will do their first tour and they'll do really well. Like, I mean, yeah, you're right, we are being a little bit negative right now, but it's not always the worst. You don't always lose money. My approach is generally to do like the less is more, and focus on hometown, home state, because it's, if you're from Sydney, it's not that expensive to travel down to Wollongong or Canberra or Newcastle or whatever. So maybe you start building those areas first before you focus on like regional Victoria or something. But I think, you know, I'm going to assume that a lot of people in this are based in New South Wales. So, you know, focus on the East Coast because it's not as difficult to tour. Don't worry so much about going to Perth straight away if you've only, you know, got one song out and 1,500 Instagram followers. So yeah, I think going small is probably better. And like we said earlier, just finding places that, you know, there's going to be an audience. Sometimes that might mean taking a bit of risk. And I think, you know, if you can try and have a mix of those shows on a tour and do maybe there's a couple of shows that are guarantees and you know you're going to get some income for those, and then you take a bit of a risk on a few others and have a bit of a mix. Yeah,
great. And yeah, I guess while we're still on money, we did mention grants before. Are there a lot of grants for touring, or how can people access those?
I feel like I write a lot of support letters for grants, so there must be. Music New South Wales has the best page with all of the grants listed, so everyone go check that out if you haven't. It's something that I sort of refer a lot of bands to quite often. I think it's great. But yeah, there's depending on what state you're in, there's often state-based grants, and then there's, you know, Australia-wide ones as well. It's just about doing the research, I guess. But I think the Music New South Wales page does have Australia-wide grants on there, don't they? Or is it just New South Wales?
Well, Bart Denaro can answer that because he is going to jump on now to tell us about Music New South Wales's new project, the Regional Touring Network, and then I will do the Q&A after that. So hey Bart, welcome. So anyone who's asked a question, I will get to it, but here is Bart to tell us all about the Regional Touring Network and maybe about grant opportunities on the Music New South Wales website while we're here.
Yeah, so anything. Hi everyone. Amazing panel, by the way. Just some really great insights. And as someone who has been in touring bands myself, like a lot of the negativity really resonates, unfortunately. But also it's just like I think Tom hit on at one point, there are those intangibles that come with touring. It's the camaraderie, it's the experiences that sort of fuse you together as a unit, you know, if you're in a band or if you're with a team. And they're just some of the most incredible memories of my life, and I would not give them up for any amount of money, within reason. So yeah, so what I'm going to talk about now, and I notice in the chat there are a few people who have been sort of, you know, skirting around this, asking about whether it's worth, I think Damon in the chat was asking about whether it's only worth playing weekenders in the A markets, so Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. Well, I mean, I would love to ask the panel that, just to sort of lead into this, the value of touring regionally. How do you guys see it in the scheme of, like, maybe Beck, if you want to start thinking about putting together a tour for an act that you look after?
I think it's really important because it means that you're going to other markets and it's just another place that you can take your music. And you know, I think Loren touched on before, sometimes people can't travel, they can't afford to, or you know, they don't have the means to get outside of their town. So I think it's a really important thing to do, and the more you do it, the more you're going to build an audience in that space. And you know, it doesn't mean you have to go to tiny towns where you don't really know what's going on, but like just ones that we talked about before, like try Wollongong, or you know, like around Wollongong there are small towns like Thirroul, like has this amazing music scene because heaps of people moved there from Sydney, and it's only, you know, just over an hour out of Sydney, so it's not too far. But like go hang out at Frank's Wild Ears and there's always a vibe, you know, or a lot of the different events that you know, Tom and the Yoz Now's crew put on. And same in Victoria, Queensland, there's just like find those little spaces where people hang out and listen to the kind of music that you listen to and see where they're going. I think as well, people moved out of the cities during COVID. So there are more younger people, especially, living in regional areas now. Like there's stats to prove that there's been growth in the last few years, more so than ever. So I think it's really worthwhile. And I try and encourage all of my artists to do it if they can afford to, and if we can find the right places for them to go. And I love the Music New South Wales tool. It's so cool to just, I have my own sort of like lists and platforms or whatever they use, but I think it's really great to have that map there and see where everything is and all the information about each venue. So thanks for making that. It's great for an agent. Can you make one for every other state as well? Thank you.
Well, thanks for the masterful segue. So I am now I'm gonna give you a just give me 1 second. Yeah, so I'm going to give you a little tour through the Regional Touring Network, and the Regional Touring Network is a tool, an online tool that's map-based, that we have sort of put together to spotlight regions of New South Wales and venues in those regions, and just kind of make it easier, because for anyone who's tried to book a regional tour, finding information that's, information about the rooms that you're going to be encountering, anything about the areas, there's no standardized information. And so that's what we really tried to do with the Regional Touring Network. So I'll just give you a quick little look through it. And I encourage everyone to just actually go to the Regional Touring Network, which is rtn.musicnewsouthwales.com. And this is it. So this is the main screen, and you'll come to this when you come to the site. As you can see, there's this map of New South Wales, and all these icons are colored according to this key down here. So it will be divided into different types of venues, and you can just use it as a map, flick through, click on an area. This area has multiple venues. Click on the Sunken Monkey. Here you get a really quick reference of what kind of venue it is, its capacity bracket, whether it's wheelchair accessible. And from here, you can either go to more info and you'll get more detailed info about the venue, which we'll look at in a second, or you can add it to your route. So the crux of this is a tour planner. So here, over on this left hand side panel, you've got your venues tab. And so the venues are listed here in alphabetical order. All the venues on the RTN are here, but you can filter what gets shown up here. You can filter by venue type, by capacity bracket, and by accessibility, and then you can update. So if I look at pub or hotel or bar for, say, a smallish tour, and I want full accessibility, I update that. And if I actually change that, then as we can see on the map, we've only got the blue. So we've only got the pub, hotels, and bars, and then we can choose our tour that way. But I would like to clear all those, update, and you can basically do everything on this side that you can on the map, but then we get to the real juicy stuff, which is planning your tour. So if you're starting, say you're starting from Canberra, you can simply search Canberra. Well, let's start from the Central Coast, actually. So that's just laying down a marker on the Central Coast. Then you can look on the map, say I want to go to the queue, I'll add it to my route. It pops up here in the left-hand panel. From there, I want to go to the River Rock Cafe in Bermagui. I want to add it to my route. Then I want to end back up on the Central Coast. So here I have my short tour. And what I can do from here is I'll add a tentative start date. So just say this Friday, I'm going to start. I'm going to be playing the Q on Friday night. I'm going to be playing the River Rock Cafe on Saturday night. Then I'm going to be back on Sunday. Then I can calculate my route, which will give me approximate driving time. And then after I've done all of that, I can either send that, click on that, copy that link and send it to the rest of my band. They can check it out. My band, my agent, anyone in my team, and they can just check it out. Or I can copy that link and save it and return later to work on my tour, or I can download it. And when you click download, it will download a spreadsheet with all the important information. So it'll have the booking, the contact details for the booker for the venue, venue address, all the relevant information that will actually help you. Then take that, go to the phone, do all your ringing, and then you can come back on here and make any adjustments and then print it off again once it's all been booked in. That is basically how it works. I would just really invite you all to jump in there, have a play around, get a feel for it. When you want to get a bit more information on these venues, you can either from this venues tab, you can click on the photos of the venues here, or on the map, click more info. And here you'll have some photos of the venue, but importantly, you'll have a whole lot of tech specs. So you have stage size, you'll have whether there's lighting available, you'll have the number of PA channels, whether an engineer is included or you have to provide your own engineer. All these things, all these sort of technical aspects that are so important to a touring act. And of course, you've got actual capacity sizes as well in here, so not just the brackets. If ever there's any incorrect info that you can see on any of these venue pages, you can click incorrect info and basically send it to us and we'll update it. And from here, from this tab, you want to go back to your original tab, and all of your tour information is there. Okay, I like the server. I'm going to add it. I'm going to move it up into this slot, change the tentative date, and basically that's it. So we have started this with around about 150 regional venues. We're always looking to add more, and we are adding more every week. On the info tab here, there's a link to get your venue on the RTN. So if any of you out there listening are venue owners, or you know of a venue in your region that is a really great venue, treats their artists well, you've had some really good nights there, encourage them to jump on and fill out that form and get on the RTN. And that's basically it. I will stop sharing.
Nice one, Bart. We got some comments while you were doing that. Nerida says, great work. That looks like such a helpful, useful tour. Thanks. And Jane and Pablo said, how did this happen? And can we get it for Queensland? Amazing. This needs to be for every state. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we would love for it to expand, and we built it intentionally so that that was a real possibility. So yeah, I mean, sky's the limit.
Yeah, nice. Congratulations.
Oh, you too. Everyone.
And circling back to the grant chat before, Laura from Music New South Wales has said there are 2 grants on offer at the moment. One is for regional arts touring through Create New South Wales, and the other one is for contemporary music touring, which is from OzCo. And there's a funding calendar on the Music New South Wales website as well. So it's all there. Yeah. Should we jump into the Q&A, Bart, or did you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that's it. The main thing that I want to get across is reiterate what Beck said, how important regional touring is in building a fan base, you know, just getting your live chops up as well, like refining what you're doing live, also just meeting new people, meeting new artists. And another thing that I just want to give a shout out to is our regional Spotify playlists. So as you know, while you're booking these things, you'll probably want to be playing with artists that are from those regions who can sort of leverage their relationships and get an actual crowd in to see you. So yeah, we have plenty of resources to help you get out there, and it's definitely worthwhile.
I just would like to mention with grants as well, look into like your local community boutique community development companies that work within the arts. I know here in Tamworth we have Arts Northwest for this region, so have a look into those you know, small businesses and you know, arts companies. They might have like micro grants on offer and other things that are separate to these other bigger grants that are a smaller pool that will give you a bigger chance of, you know, actually securing funding.
Here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again for running us through the regional touring network, Bart. And yeah, that's on the Music New South Wales website. So go and have a play. The visuals are beautiful as well. If you're not booking a tour, just go and play around on it and see what it looks like. It's great.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bart.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so we'll do a couple of questions now. This is a great one from Will. I'm going to throw it to you, Beck. Will wants to know if they should approach booking agents or should they wait for them to be approached by a booking agent?
Yeah, I definitely think we should approach. I get anything from 10 to 30 emails a week from bands who are looking for a booking agent. My advice is just to send like a really concise email, keep it short and sweet. Include links. I hate it when people email me being like, we're looking for a booking agent, and maybe put a bit of information, but they don't put a link to any of their music or their socials. Like, you think it would be obvious, but so many people reach out with very little information. So yeah, I just like to have a few links. It's great to know where you're based. Maybe if you've got any shows coming up, you know, it's always good to say, you know, we're playing these shows. If you're in these cities, let me know when you can come along. I don't really I run a really small booking agency, so I don't take on very many artists. So my, you know, usual response is like, I don't have time to be your agent, but I always add people to a list of bands that we then keep in mind for supports on tours. So when I'm booking a tour for a band that I work with, we'll always book supports in each city. And so then I'll go to my grid and I'm like, oh, that band from Newcastle emailed me last week. They sounded really cool. Andy Gollage needs a support in Newcastle. So then I send it to him, and, you know, and sometimes that then works out. And I have occasionally started working with an artist who's cold emailed me because we've just built that relationship over time. And maybe I've put them on a few support spots and then seen their show and then gone, actually, there's something going on here. So I think it's really valuable and worthwhile reaching out to agents. You know, everyone's busy, so don't be upset if they don't reply to you straight away. I think a week or two, no reply, it's all good to send a friendly follow-up. But yeah, just bear in mind people are busy, and it's just how it is at the moment. But yeah, I always try and reply to everyone that emails me, so even if it's late.
I guess following on from that, another question from an anonymous attendee. They'd like to know if having a booking agent is the only way to know about international tours before they're announced.
No, and even having an agent, sometimes we don't know about international tours that get announced. We do, you know, get emails from promoters and people that we deal with all the time and have built relationships with. But a lot of the time, I'll see it online with everyone else. It is a lot harder to get on an international support without an agent, but you can always do exactly what Loren said before, find out who the promoter is. Most of the time, it's fairly easy to Google. You know, like Alt J just announced a tour today. Google Alt J promoter and it will probably come up with Frontier or Live Nation or whoever it is. And then you can contact them, and you might have to reach out to a random email address, but who cares? You never know. So it's always worth trying to put your hat in the ring. Or if you've built up relationships within the industry, ask someone else if they know and go, I really want to support this international band. Do you know who's working on it? Can I reach out to them? And once you've got that person's email, then you can keep in touch with them. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. When we were talking about supports earlier in the chat, I think we were kind of talking about it from the context of how do I support someone else? But someone in the chat has asked how many supports they need for their headline tour. Maybe Loren or Tom, you can speak to that. Loren, do you want to start?
Oh, I was pointing to Tom. I think it's up to you, really. You know, I really study the industry, and you know, I'm well networked, and I have some really cool friends all over the place, and so, you know, I really, yeah, I mean, it's up to you. One of the tours that I've done, I had a different support act in each town. Yeah, and like some of them were just kids who got crazy amount of, you know, family and supporters turning up to the show. And you know, I say that they're kids, but they're extremely talented. Like, you know, Castlereagh Connection, Kyla Bell out of Moree can outsing anyone with one lip tied behind their back. Like, just incredible artists who, you know, will really get a following to your show. So I mean, it's up to you.
Yeah, Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, like if it's a headline tour, I suppose 1 to 2 in each city is fine. Like, I think is the same, like what Loren said, it really is up to you. I mean, it's always good to get as many supports on as you can, like, especially in the early days, like jumping on having a bill of like a bunch of different bands is good, just because like it'll bring a bunch of that community around, and just rather than worrying about how many you need, it's just like, who are some people who are part of that community? And I think that's probably something I would think about more, rather than just like quantity, is just who is part of the scene that you're trying to crack into, who is part of that community, and who's going to help your show become like a, you know, something that you want it to be.
Yeah, great. I want to circle back to the conversation we were having earlier about money and being prepared to lose money on a tour. Someone in the chat has asked how you actually get paid for a tour and what the different ways of getting paid for a tour are.
Well, if you do a headline show at a venue, then the venue will pay you. Well, they should. If they don't, then it's terrible. You know, most of the time, if it's a ticketed show, if you're selling pre-sales, you might be doing that through Eventbrite or Mosh Tix or OzTix, and then most of the time the venue will collect that ticketing money. They'll deduct venue hire fees, production fees, whatever other fees there are involved, which should be outlined to you before the show happens. And then they'll pay you whatever's left over. I think most venues pay after the show online, like they'll pay to your bank account. Some venues still pay cash on the night, which is fairly old school, but does still happen occasionally. So that's generally the way. And if it's a show where you're getting a guarantee, then you already know exactly what you're getting paid. And so, you would just invoice them for that amount. But I guess, after that, you take out all your costs for travel and petrol and accommodation and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Without getting too granular, I have another question that's kind of the same vein, but someone's asked if the band should be paying the venue to book the show and then hope to earn money off the door, or should the venue be splitting the earnings from the door and the bar, etc.?
I think there are lots of different ways that a venue can operate. I think, like Beck said, as long as they're upfront with you in terms of how they do operate, I think that's the main thing, because, like I've seen shows happen at ticketed venues here in Wollongong where, they've been like, an artist has been told like, this is the venue hire fee, which might be $3.30 a ticket, and here's the production fee, and that's what's involved in booking the show. And, maybe the show doesn't go so well, and the amount that they actually made from the show was less than or like equal to the venue hire and the production fee, and they don't end up making anything. And, they get angry about it. But at the same time, I think that's something that you need to make sure you're researching before you book a venue, is like, is this actually the right venue for me? Like, because there are a lot of venues, like we do a lot of shows where it is a free show, but you'll get guaranteed like $200 or $300, which is good for your first couple of shows, and regardless of the amount of people that come, you're going to be able to earn some money, or at least mitigate some losses.
On that, do you think it's necessary to do free shows? One person has asked, if you would recommend doing free shows before moving on to ticketed ones.
I honestly do. I mean, free. I don't. When I say free show, I don't mean a show where you're not getting paid at all, because I don't think that is a good precedent to set. Like, I feel like you're working, you're playing a set, you should be getting paid for what you're doing. But in terms of doing a show that is free entry for the punter and you're getting paid a guarantee by the artist, by the venue, then 100%, because especially in the early days, because you're going to be able to play to more people who have less of a barrier to be at the show. And obviously, as you get more of an audience, you can start looking at ticketed venues and stuff like that, for sure.
While we're here and still talking about money, I feel like another, and this is me just stabbing in the dark as well, but another avenue for income through touring is selling merch on tour. And one person has asked what merch they should be making, or if it's really worth it to bring merch. Loren, have you had any experience on that front?
Yeah, it's definitely worth it to make merch, and merch is one of those things that you can have fun with, you can be creative with, and really tailor to your brand. If it's on brand, then slap a logo on it. If it's something cool, but the classics that really sell, the collectibles, I feel like that's really what people go for. Stubby holders, shirts, caps, mugs, those classic things are really what people look to collect. I've got a Billy Joe Porter t-shirt. I've got a Piper Butcher t-shirt. They want to add to their collection, those classic things. You can't go wrong with those. Definitely worth having merch.
We are getting close to the end of question time, so I'll do one or two more and then we'll wrap it up. But James has asked if any of you have advice for bands in rural towns that are 5 or more hours drive away from the nearest music scene.
Start your own music scene. And that's a tough one. I guess you like what we've said before, it means you sort of have to invest and plan really carefully to then go to another town and perform there if there's not a lot going on in your smaller rural town. But if there is ways you can start something, you know, in your own town, then that's really cool.
Another question I have here, you know, earlier we were talking about whether you should approach a booking agent or, you know, wait for them to approach you, or I guess for people who don't yet have one, how do they go about booking with a venue? Do they contact the venue directly, and how does that happen?
I suppose, yeah, like the majority of the time you can go to the venue directly, or else there'll be like a venue booker like yours now, for instance. Like that's what we do here in Wollongong. We've got a bunch of different venues that we book, and we'll have like an info email, and you know, even if the specific venue you're looking for isn't available, we'll be able to go, hey, there's actually this other venue available that could be worthwhile for you. So yeah, generally it's just contact the venue directly, or me, or someone like me.
Yeah, even as an agent, I reach out to venues all the time if I haven't dealt with them before, and most of the time they've got a generic email address on their website or their Facebook page, or sometimes I just message them on Facebook if they don't reply. So there's lots of different ways to get in contact.
Great. I'm going to squeeze one more question in, and I think that this person was asking it kind of in reference to the conversation we were having earlier about free events. They want to know about not-for-profit type events. They said they get told all the time there's no payment for community and local-based events. Do you think there's still value in performing at those?
I think there is, but you know, choose the community or the company that you're going to support. You know, I get a lot of inquiries for different artists I work with to do charity events, and a lot of them will be like, I'm going to choose a cause that I really care about and I'll do an event for that, but I'm not going to do every single one that is asked of me, because no one can afford to play for free all the time. But a lot of the time artists will donate their services and donate their time for an event if there's a charity element involved, of all different levels. And I think if someone's reaching out to you and asking you to play at a charity event, like just ask questions, you know, about what they're doing and what venue they're choosing and what marketing they've got planned, because there's nothing worse than someone having a grand idea for a charity event and going to like a 1,000 cap venue, but not necessarily having the plan to sell tickets, you know, to those kind of things. So I think it's just knowing what you want. But, you know, you don't have to say yes to every single community event that comes your way. I think it's say yes to the ones that feel important to you and that work for you and that you'll get something out of.
Yeah, I guess they need to kind of work with your brand almost as well. I know I said that was the last question, but I have one more kind of fun one. And since we have been a little bit negative today, let's end on something a bit fun. But yeah, one person wanted to know about riders and what was appropriate to ask for with their hospitality rider on tour. They were worried about maybe overstepping a little bit. Help, it says.
I think you can ask for whatever you want. Just don't expect the venue to actually do all of it. I think that's the main thing. I feel like in my job, at least, is on the venue booking side, I would say the majority of hospitality riders I see are unrealistic. And a lot of people will just add random stuff to see if they get it. But, you know, I think all you can do is ask. And as long as you're not being rude and when someone comes back and says like, hey, we're not going to be able to get you like a bowl of just green M&Ms, you know, like as long as you're sweet with that, that's fine. Like, you know, or like it's not the beer that you wanted, or like they, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, I think it's one of those things. Just ask for what you want. Don't be too unrealistic, and maybe don't expect to get everything you ask for.
I definitely think the same. Yeah, don't be a diva. But if it's practical and if it's, you know, sustenance for you and your band, then it's within, you know, within the realm of reality to ask for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Be real. Just be real.
Knowing what venue you're playing at. Like if the venue has a pub, restaurant attached to it, then ask for a meal to be provided. But if you're playing at a venue that doesn't have any food, chances are they're not going to give you any food. So one of my bands has a puppy on their rider, which has been provided once. I think.
Really?
Cool. Yeah.
What did you say? It was unethical?
No, it was provided once.
Oh.
Someone brought their dog for the before the show.
Amazing. I feel like that's a really beautiful note to wrap things up on. Thank you so much for speaking, Bart, Loren, Tom, and Beck. You've had such great insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having us, Mia.
Oh, anytime. It wasn't me. It was Music New South Wales.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. This video will live on Facebook and on musicnewsouthwales.com forever as a resource you can access at any time. Thank you. Have a nice night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I also want to say, if there's any time, like your community's right here, all the participants, go and follow them on Instagram, on the socials, have a yarn amongst yourselves. Feel free to message me about anything that you didn't get to ask, you know, we're all very friendly, and thank yous for tuning in.